I am Catherine April Waters, Waters with two T's, Catherine with a C. On this Wednesday, July 13th, People's Internet Radio. Also, the podcast for this show will be played on Awake Radio in my old time slot on Tuesdays, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So right now I'm going to introduce the first guest, Mr. John Wathen, who is with the Creek Keeper for Hurricane Creek. In March 2012, he took some time out of his day to talk to Alina Coriel and her kids about his experiences in caring for the watershed. So you do a lot of work in Louisiana, maintaining the natural world down there. And you also have, which I've shared, a video on YouTube by Greenpeace New Zealand entitled "Every New Zealander Should See This," John Wathen's eyewitness account of the Gulf of Mexico disaster. And you're also a journalist. So thank you for joining me on the People's Internet Radio, John Wathen.
Yeah, it's John Wathen, by the way.
Wathen.
A lot of people get that wrong. No problem. I live in Alabama. I do a lot of work in Louisiana and around the Gulf due to the BP spill. I'm the Hurricane Creek Keeper for the Friends of Hurricane Creek in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
And so this video that you have, that you did in New Zealand, you were trying to give the New Zealanders a bit of a heads up to not let what happened in the Gulf of Mexico happen to them. And, I mean, just to, get the truth out, BP is clearly, not telling the public the truth. The Corexit was designed to cover up, to disperse the oil, out of sight, out of mind, to cover up exactly how much oil was spilt. And
yeah, that was one of the problems we were dealing with all along down there in the Gulf. With the introduction of the Corexit at subsea levels, unprecedented subsea levels, and the temperatures, it was keeping a lot of the oil on the bottom, to where nobody ever really knew the exact total of how much oil was lost. There's a reason for that. BP would have been fined by the barrel for every barrel of oil that they lost had they been able to account for it. Many of the people that I spoke to along the Gulf who actually live there and are familiar with their beaches have said since then that it would have been much better and easier to clean it up had they not introduced the Corexit.
Right. It
would have all been on the surface and on the beach as opposed to mixed into the water column.
And so how does the city officials or government expect BP to give them an accurate account of how much oil was spilled? I mean, isn't there some sort of a government agency to find that out instead of relying on BP to, police themselves?
Well, you would think so, but in the case of the Gulf of Mexico, BP was certainly in charge. The EPA advised them not to use the Corexit. They did it anyway in unprecedented amounts. It had never been researched like this. So, BP was pretty much in charge of the entire operation out there. And as far as government officials stepping in, you got to look at the paradigm from their perspective. A lot of these government officials have, in totality, they have millions of dollars that have been given to them for their campaigns by the extraction energy, in particular BP. So they're not going to take a real hard stand against the industry who's actually feeding their campaign. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. BP feeds our government. So our government is not going to stand, and it's not just BP. It's extraction technology, whether it's fracking, deep sea oil drilling, mountaintop removal, or coal mining in the Black Mesa. It's all the same premise. These are the people who, in my opinion, own our government.
Right. The corporations definitely own the government. That's been a point brought out numerous times. So let's see, like you talk about how the company that makes the Corexit, is it Anadarko?
No, Anadarko was a sister company
Okay.
to BP at the time of the Deepwater Horizon blowout. Anadarko was moving into New Zealand waters at the time they called me down there to give my presentation. So Anadarko, actually, they never did get set up down there.
Okay.
We created a movement down there within a group of people who were really willing to take it on. And they've done a remarkable job at stopping a lot of this deep sea oil drilling because they had information up front.
And you, 11 men died on the Deepwater Horizon oil platform. And when you flew over it, I mean, you felt that it was hopeless to clean this much oil up.
Exactly. You know, you mentioned the 11 dead. That's something that very few people talk about anymore, and it has to be talked about because 11 fathers didn't go home. 11 uncles, brothers, cousins were taken out of the family circle. That is a type of impact that I think should take precedent even over the damage of the oil. And that was bad.
And, right. The focus did go from the oil spill and the health concerns to how much it was costing BP.
Right. And once the and there again, this is by design. The for-profit media sources, NBC, ABC, CBS, you get what I'm talking about. The advertising media takes millions of dollars from extraction technology to support their business, so they're not going to come out as strong as some of the independent journalists were coming out against what was happening and trying to tell the truth about what happened. You know, you said hopeless, and I used that word for the first time in my environmental career in the Gulf of Mexico. When I saw the size of that oil slick for the first time, I knew in my heart there was no way to stop it. It was coming ashore. And it did.
And they had... Sorry, finish.
The problem with the way it came ashore is when they mix the Corexit with it, like I said, it sinks the oil. The oil then becomes part of the water column where it can actually be evaporated into rain clouds, which it did, and it rained down all across the southeast. We had crop failures here in Alabama that my personal garden failed that year, and we had a series of acid rain events. So when you mix this stuff in such a way, the boom that they put up around the Marsh Islands, it was useless because the Corexit is making the oil part of the water. It flows under the boom. It splashes over the boom. There's no way to contain it at that point.
A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Mark Manning. I think I might have mentioned that to you. He did a film called The Rising. It's therisingfilm.tv. If you just try to look up The Rising, you usually get Bruce Springsteen.
I am supporting that.
Yeah.
I'm one of the supporters of that. And, that's going to be a great movie when it comes out, a great documentary.
And I was, reading up on the cover-up and what's going on down there. And I read in an article from Grist that the Corexit actually makes the crude 52 times more toxic.
Absolutely. Dr. Wilma Subra
Yeah.
is one of the leading experts in this particular field. Wilma's been studying this stuff for years and years and years. She's one of the ones that documented the intensity of it. When you mix the Corexit with the oil, yes, it intensifies the toxicity by as much as 52 times. Corexit is a chemical that has to be extracted from the crude oil in order to keep it from breaking down. In other words, so it can be viscous, it can be used in your engine. It's a solvent. It's made to break down the oil in nature over time. So when they reintroduce this stuff, they're introducing a level of toxicity that I don't think anybody really understood until this.
And Corexit is actually banned in the UK, where BP is from.
Exactly. Corexit is banned in, I've forgotten how many countries now. I think it's about 17 or 18 countries that completely ban the use of Corexit. It's the first response on the New Zealand deep sea drilling plan. That's another thing that we had to talk seriously about down there. An interesting point about Corexit, it's made by a company called Nalco.
Right.
Nalco is owned part and parcel by BP.
Okay, right. That's the company, right, that makes the Corexit. That's
right.
25% owned by BP.
Right.
Okay.
The Prince William Sound, when the Exxon Valdez ran aground, they used Corexit there, and it's wiped out the fishery. People got sick. Dr. Ricky Ott came down from Alaska and talked to us on the coast about what to expect, and she's been spot on with her predictions so far. We could see a negative impact in the fisheries in the Gulf of Mexico for generations.
I wanted to refer to that video that you were giving to the people in New Zealand. And, it is really sad when it shows all the birds and you refer to this, I guess it's like a school of dolphins that are right in the oil, and you refer to the rainbow color of the oil and you call it off-gassing. That's what that rainbow color means, that it's like toxic fumes. And all these dolphins died.
And whales.
Right.
And turtles.
Right.
And birds.
Yeah.
And
I know.
That was one of the saddest parts about making any of these videos is regularly we were seeing pods of dolphins in the rainbow. That is probably the worst time to be around it. It'd be like trying to stick your head in a can of gasoline and breathe. For them, they are just like human beings. They have to have fresh, clean air in order to be healthy. So when you're in an environment where from horizon to horizon, all you can see is oil sheen, and then there's these pods of dolphins, it was heartbreaking. But that was their daily reality in the Gulf.
Right. Right. It's you also speak about this one incident, or one of many incidences, perhaps, where the cleanup people or whoever it was trying to scare birds away with some loud boom, and of course it's in the instinct of the dolphins, the turtles, the whales. They have, they're in the flow of nature, unlike man. And it's, it's really crazy how man thinks that they can rearrange the natural rhythm of life and scare these birds away, which of course are only going to come back because that's what is in their instinct to do, just like the dolphins were, it's their instinct to swim to a certain place you mentioned to have their young, and even though they're swimming into oil.
If they can come back. See, we've got some situations down there now, especially on Cat Island. My buddy PJ Hahn has been really working hard to document what's been going on Cat Island. It was damaged some time ago in hurricanes, but during the BP crisis, Cat Island got slammed. It was one of the major rookeries for several different species of birds. PJ has got hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of the birds on that island. Now the island is gone. It's completely underwater. The birds cannot come back there. All of the vegetation was killed off by the toxicity of the oil and the Corexit. What little bit of vegetation was holding on is gone, and now so is the island. The Breton Sound, Barataria, places like that where there were major species came in, and that's the only place they knew to go. The dolphins, they went to a specific area to breed year after year after year after year. So they have no way of calibrating or understanding the danger that we humans created for them.
Yeah.
And as a result, we've killed thousands of them.
What I find, I really have just come to believe that corporations are mentally ill. I mean, just sociopaths, because of they literally think that they could override the laws of nature. I mean, I feel like they're just literally at war with nature, and the more nature tries to assert itself, and all the signs and symptoms of what we're doing to it are just screaming back at us, and the corporations are just oblivious. I mean, so it goes to show you how off course, just, naturally and healthily corporate profit and the people that run these corporations are. And you talk about how BP, they have no backup plan to even in case anything happens. All they're concerned about is drilling and profit, and they even ignored the fact that there was a fault in this drill. I believe it was made by Halliburton, the
rig.
Right, the rig. And Halliburton told them about it, and BP ignored it.
That's right. BP and Anadarko, according to the records, held a party on the rig to celebrate their safety record the night before it blew up.
Oh, boy.
They had just gotten off the rig, and a few hours later, it was burning. I mean, the mentality of these people, no. These are not people. Corporations are not people. They should never be given the same civil rights as people. They have completely turned their back on the people down there. Their own workers, their cleanup workers, were sprayed with Corexit at night. The C-130s were blanket spray in the Gulf. Shrimp boats were getting sprayed. Helicopters were spraying Barataria Bay with fishermen out there. Cleanup workers on the beach were coming in contact with it, and people were getting sick.
Yeah.
The doctors on the beach, they would never say that this was directly related to BP, because here again, this is my theory. I can't prove this. There's no paper trail. But these doctors are governed by the insurance companies, and the insurance companies are also insuring the oil industry.
Well,
There's disconnect. People now are still very sick, and finally, we're beginning to get scientific evidence that connects the BP syndrome to human illness.
Sheesh.
There's a girl down there now, Tricia Springstead, that's running the Second Wind Project. She's a registered nurse, been 30-something years in the field. She's been collecting data and actually has some documentation that proves there is a such thing as the BP syndrome. And people have it. But the corporations are not allowing that kind of information to get out. If it weren't for freelance journalists like ourselves, those documents would never be known to the general public. Because according to the for-profit media, the beaches are fine, the water's fine, come on down. At the Gulf Shore Shrimp Festival, they bring in shrimp from overseas because the Gulf catch is down so low. They've been doing that for years, though. I mean, that's just the way it is. Things on the Gulf are not as they always seem.
Someone in the chat is saying nature has a line in the sand. One day at this rate we'll cross it. I think we've already crossed it.
Yes, we have.
Then nature will do what nature does, eradicate us from the planet.
I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. E.O. Wilson. He's a world-renowned scientist. He's one of the top-rated climatologists around the world. E.O. Wilson did his postgraduate work right here on Hurricane Creek, and he told me a few years ago that nature has a line in the sand. We come to a tipping point. In his words, we've already crossed that tipping point now. And it's up to humanity to mutate or perish. Think about that.
Absolutely. I mean,
diseases we're seeing now are uncommon. We're seeing huge cancer clusters, primarily in areas of heavy industry. Take a look at I-10 going from back.
John? John? Oh, it looks like I lost him. Let me call him back.
Hello?
John? Hello? John?
Hello?
Oh, yeah, I could hear you.
Okay. Where were we?
We've crossed that line. The scientist that you were speaking about, who did his study right down there in the Gulf.
Yeah, well, where he told me this was on Hurricane Creek here in Tuscaloosa. And I don't know if your listeners heard it or where we got cut off, but he told me then that we've already reached the tipping point and gone beyond it.
Absolutely.
It's up to humanity at this point to either mutate or perish.
Right. I mean,
the diseases we're seeing today, the cancer clusters, there's various new diseases coming all the time because of the various junk we're doing to the earth. The cancer cluster, take for instance, from Baton Rouge to New Orleans along I-10. It's called Cancer Alley. It's called that for a reason. There's more refineries in that area than there are pretty much anywhere else in the country. There's cause and effect. You can actually see where these industries are and the illnesses that surround them.
Unbelievable. I have been a huge advocate for health for a long time. Not just physical, but emotional, mental health, which doesn't get a lot of airtime. Most people don't even know what it is, but which in my opinion is why corporations are now, if you get in the way of their profits, you're a criminal. I mean, it's to the point with corporations like Monsanto. if you interfere with corporate profit, I mean, you spoke about the when they were setting like some of the oil on fire, how many dolphins or whales and turtles were burned up in that. And right, if there's no count, so BP can't be held accountable because they don't even count the dead sea life.
That's right. That's right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, that is mental illness. I mean, when you have the facts and the evidence and nature giving you the facts and you just discount it, that is severe mental illness. I mean, I don't know, what else can you call it?
Well, the mental stress that this whole episode, and it's not just BP, it's like the coal ash situation in Perry County, Alabama, where the coal ash is blowing over onto people. Down in the Gulf, it was the fumes blowing in on people when they were burning all of that oil. The fumes were blowing in on people, and that makes them afraid. You've got parents and grandparents like my good friends down there, the Louisiana Bayou Keeper, Mike Roberts and Tracy Coons. They were afraid to let their grandkids get in the water, and that's their life. That's their water. You take these kids out on the boat, and you teach them shrimping from the time they can't, that they don't have to wear diapers anymore. And then for all of a sudden to have to tell those children, you may not be able to do this. You might want to think about another occupation. This is a tremendous strain on the family structure.
Right.
Because the parents have to sit back and wonder, well, if I can't take my kids out fishing because the fisheries are closed, what are they going to do but hang around town and get in trouble? There is when your loved one is sick and everybody's denying the reason and the doctors can't do anything for them. There's, and it wasn't just the workers. There's the girls at the Waffle House. They have nothing to do with the oil industry, but if nobody's going in there to eat, they're not making tips, so they're not going to get their hair done, so the hairdresser is also impacted. Right. Everybody's morale goes down at that point, and there is a mental anguish. There's almost like a pallor that hangs in the air. It is mentally disturbing.
Absolutely.
The view of all of that dead wildlife. For somebody like me, I didn't live right directly on the coast, but I always went to the coast for my recreation. So to see everything that I loved about the coast dead, it was heartbreaking.
Oh boy, it's it's like watching a loved one being, killed. I mean, in the next hour, that's what the topic is going to be, like these recent shootings. Three people in the, and even policing, justice, for-profit prisons, everything is about profit at the expense of the earth and people, and it's very, very eye-opening. And I mean, a lot of people haven't really gotten to the point yet where they believe. I've interviewed NSA whistleblower William Binney 3 times, and he's said it 3 times. Your government sold you out to corporate profit. They get more money. The more terrorism there is, they get more money. So they actually are in the business of creating problems. I've interviewed Anthony Lowenstein about his book called Disaster Capitalism. John Perkins, who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman, calls what we live in a death economy. When debt is actually being bought and sold, and companies are profiting off of debt. I mean, come on, like,
Capitalism at its finest.
This is what Wall Street does.
I know. And the sad part about that is there is nobody running for any office I know of today who has the wherewithal to stand up to it. There's not a good candidate on the slate, period.
When you said, you spoke again about them setting the oil on fire, and you said something, it literally went right through my body when you said that it created its own weather pattern. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the oil slick itself, normally in the Gulf, without all that garbage on the water, the sun hits the water and it penetrates. And it goes deep into the water. It warms the surface a little bit. But with the oil slick on top of it, it was bouncing that sunlight back up. And then the heat from the fires, you could actually see columns of clouds building right over that immediate area, almost like it is. It's like when you, I don't know how many times you've flown in a small airplane, but flying from the water on land, normally at the beach in the summer, is where you'll see these kinds of thunderheads. That's what we were seeing at sea. And it was almost like, you could feel the turbulence in the airplane change when you got out there.
Wow.
That's the kind of thing that normally you don't feel.
And to be denying it, that's the worst part of it, is not only do they do it, they deny it, and it was the cover-up that was actually worse than just the spill itself.
Oh, we broke open so many of their cover-ups. I tell you what, man, if it hadn't been for one pilot in particular, Tom Hutchings was great about getting me out there to get what we needed to tell the truth. There was one particular instance where the Coast Guard came out and said that there had been no oiling at the Chandler Islands. The oil was closed, but there had been no oiling on the island. Well, we flew over it that very afternoon, and it was covered with oil. When we posted the story, the Coast Guard immediately came out and said that they were mistaken, that there was, in fact, oiling on the Chandler Islands, and it was significant oiling. That kind of went on regularly. They would tell something about how clean the beach was, and I'd go out on the beach and get pictures of it. Social media had more real news than the for-profit media.
Right.
When the cap was put on the well and they said that it was done, I watched CNN roll their cords up down in Fort Morgan and drove out, and we never saw them again. They were there almost every day until the cap was on. And then as far as the media was telling people, it was over. Everything's cleaned up.
Right. We
still got oil down there. Scientists now think that over 3/4 of the oil that was blown out of that well is still laying on the bottom of the Gulf out there mixed with Corexit.
Right. And we have no idea, again, right, talk about, the shrimp, or, how the cycle of this is just going to come back to attack the people in a sense, because in storms, right, the ocean is going to take that oil and just, throw it back on shore.
Thank you. You mentioned that, and I was going to bring this up also. With that much oil laying on the bottom, we've already had one incident of it in Aotearoa, in a little town called Lafitte, where the Louisiana Bayou Keepers are headquartered. There was a tropical depression came in. It may have been Lee. I'm not sure. But it brought in a significant amount of this oil from Aotearoa Bay and coated Lafitte with it. You know, these people clean up after hurricanes all the time. They know the difference in mud and residue. It was harder to clean up. It's still on the ground under some of the houses down there. We haven't had a bad hurricane yet, not since the blowout.
Right.
If we have a hurricane anywhere near the intensity of Katrina, that stuff is going to be all over the debris line. And the debris line is already, you know, during Katrina in Long Beach, the debris line was, maybe a quarter of a mile wide in places, and it stretched for miles and miles down the beach. If a fire broke out anywhere in the debris line, it took helicopters because the fire departments couldn't get their trucks in there to do anything about it, for the most part. So imagine coating a debris line with toxic oil scum. That's what's going to happen.
Yes.
The scientists that are willing to talk about it agree that is a distinct possibility. And it's almost like that pallor I was talking about. This, too, causes a great deal of an emotional stress on people to think when a hurricane comes, how much oil is coming with it.
Boy, oh boy. And, I wonder, too, because, I mean, this is, out in, eventually can move out into the ocean. I mean, that can be carried, the oil can be carried, God knows how far. Or
it has been.
Yeah.
During the time that all of it was blowing and going out there and all that corrects it was being mixed, I talked about the mixing of the oil with the water column. Well, the Gulf Loop took that stuff right around the tip end of Florida and up into the Atlantic.
I mean, there is nothing really over time stopping it from moving up the East Coast or, I mean, just like Fukushima, like you don't hear people really, some people talk about that.
In this case, I don't think that scenario really is all that significant because of the currents. I believe that any oil that is remaining on the bottom of the Gulf, unfortunately, is going to come to the Gulf shores. Wow. The currents bring it, and bless their hearts, Louisiana, Mississippi, and parts of Alabama, well, even Florida as far away as Apalachicola Bay. We saw oil there, but I didn't see any oil below Apalachicola Bay. So that current keeps it almost in an eddy, a swirling motion right against our coast. If the migration of that oil is in all likelihood going to continue to hammer the Gulf Coast.
And in that video that you present to the people in New Zealand, you have pictures of a young guy who went swimming in the Gulf, and then under ultraviolet light, you can see like lesions on his skin.
And the Corexit it gave off a distinctive glow under ultraviolet light. There were a lot of people walking around on the beach out there using them at night, battery-held UV lights, and seeing big globs of oil, that were not visible to the naked eye. It was the Corexit that allowed this stuff to come in through the beach, not up on top of the beach like the oil would have in its normal state. Because of the Corexit, it's in the water, and it actually becomes part of the water that's in the sand. Kids digging in the sand out there were digging up oil sheen. The guy you're talking about, he went out, he'd been in the water, he took a shower before that photograph was taken. There was no oil visible anywhere on him. Turn on the black light, and there's spots all over him.
And how is he today? Do you have any?
I have no idea who that, I don't even know who that gentleman. There were so many people that were involved in the early part of it that it was impossible to keep up with all of that.
In the Rising film, they illustrate, they show photographs of people, with, their skin is being eaten.
I have it.
I mean, that's like E. coli.
I have it, and I talk about it in that video that I did in New Zealand. It progressed a little farther since I got home. Finally, it's healed, but I got into a bunch of that brown foam down in Fort Morgan. I was on the beach taking pictures, and it was really windy. I got it on both arms. It was more on my right arm than the left arm. It broke out in little blisters that it took 4 years for it to completely heal. I took some very powerful antibiotics during that time that had no effect on it. It had to eventually run its course, and I've got really bright white, deep scars on my arm. A scar, if it has that white color, you can tell it went through the skin and into the meat. I've got those all over my arm. I can personally testify that yes, in fact, that did happen.
And there was this one worker, BP cleanup worker, in the Rising film, who they talk about how BP's telling them they don't need any protective covering, everything is safe, and it's not, and then they end up getting sick.
Yeah, actually, I was in Barataria. I was in Lafitte when the Louisiana Environmental Action Network came down with boxes of respirators, Tyvek suits, the little booties and gloves, all the safety stuff that people should have when they contact toxic materials. Dr. Wilma Subra was one of the ones that implemented getting that done. When they tried to dispense them, to take them out and give them to the fishermen who were doing what they call the VOO program, the Vessels of Opportunity, they were the ones out there dragging boom behind shrimp boats trying to corral this oil. BP actually told them not to wear the equipment, and if they did, they would be fired. Exactly. They were told that if their wives if they couldn't control their wives' comment, that too could get them fired. This is beyond negligence. This is intentional harm. Because all of the labels on the correction, they warn about contact with this stuff.
Right.
When you see the guys that are pumping it onto the airplanes, there's some pictures out there on the web of people who are men that are loading the chemical onto the spray planes. They're all in Tyvek. They're out of the camera's view. That's what it was all about. It gave the perception of harm and danger, and BP didn't want the general public to see that. On the 3rd of July, I checked into a hotel in Gulf Shores, Alabama. I got the highest floor I could get intentionally so I could see the beach. I'm thinking the next morning I'm going to go down there and, no, that was on the 2nd of July. Let me back up. That was on the 2nd of July. I'm thinking in the morning I'll go down and get some pictures on the beach. I heard this racket about midnight. There's heavy equipment bringing sand from the top part of the beach and spreading it out on the beach. And they're covering this stuff up with track hoes, bulldozers, backhoes, so that when the general public showed up for the 4th of July, the beaches were clean looking.
Yeah, looking.
It's the Jaws Beach syndrome. We can't close the beach. It's the 4th of July. Right. Hopefully nobody gets eaten.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it just literally amazes me how money trumps real wealth. People have been so conditioned now to, and again, like, to me, this is an environmental catastrophe. That
it's a social catastrophe.
Yeah, right.
You gotta there's a disconnect between some people who don't understand environmental harm is also harm to the populace. A good economic program is exactly the same thing as a good environmental program. The two have to work off of each other. You can't raise healthy people in a toxic environment.
Exactly. Right. I mean, money, in order to have real value, should be backed by real value, which only comes from health and nature. But, right, like we've established, we're living in a debt-based economy. So the more people circulate money, the more people, the way I see it, they're just spreading disease.
We live in a capitalist society. And I never really understood the depth of what that meant until I went to New Zealand. And my buddy Mike Smith down there, he's a full-blood Maori. He's the one that guided me all over the islands. And we got to talking about that one night. And he said, think about it, mate. Capitalism is designed to fail because capitalism requires continuous growth in a finite world.
Exactly.
It is designed to fail.
And that's why people have to go into like a an emotional and a physical deficit, a health deficit, in order to keep perpetuating money.
We're seeing that more and more every day right now.
And then, like I do a lot of interviews. I mean, I did one. I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but I'm trying to illustrate the emotional health deficiency that goes on in prisons, and inmates. The mentally ill are criminalized and warehoused in these for-profit prisons, and then you have guards with emotional health deficiency beating up on the most vulnerable people in society, are being beaten up on and killed in prisons, and the facilities cover it up, like the dolphins and the whales and the turtles and the birds.
See, it all connects. It all connects. If you're killing one part of creation, you're impacting all of it. The Lakota have a word, Mitakoyasan. It means we're all related. We're related to the trees. We're related to each other. We are related to the earth, and the earth is related to us.
Unbelievable. I mean,
that disconnect exists so powerfully in this country today. People don't get that.
And then when the corporations who create this disaster, on top of that, they deny reality, and then they cover it up. So that's like debt, and then adding more debt, and then adding more debt. And then they use their debt-based fiat currency to create even more debt. So, it becomes like a social, psychic oil spill with Corexit poured on top of it.
Somebody's dispersing our brains.
I mean, it's just true. The way that health and nature are being watered down, like fiat currency has been completely diluted to the point where it has no value. It represents debt. And most people, I try to say that during most every show, because I hear people say to me, oh, well, you got to have money to live. But I never hear people say, well, you got to have a healthy planet and a healthy family and a healthy, planet to live on. What? I mean, that's...
Exactly. Well, I grow a lot of my own food. I don't make a lot of money. Listen, as an environmental activist, you're not going to get rich in this world. I didn't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to be an environmental wacko and stay broke the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It's just something inherent in me. I can't walk away from this.
Yep. I guess that explains my financial struggle myself. I mean, I never thought at a young age speaking out about basic health concerns would be so radical that you would be literally, public enemy number one.
Well, it's good that we've talked about these problems and we've recognized, some of the issues that have caused it. But I have a firm belief that complaining about things without some resolution is a waste of breath. There is a resolution. There is a way to turn some of this around, but I'm afraid it's beyond this generation to do so. We need to train and teach the next generation and the generations after that to be more conservative, to be more responsible with the resources that are available. And for God's sake, teach them respect for one another. We have completely blown respect out of the water in this country through social media. It's so easy to call somebody a name and hit that send button, and if they don't like it, you unfriend them. That's not life.
Someone is asking on the chat if you heard of MPE, which is mathematically perfected economy.
No, that's a new one on me. Willing to hear it.
So I've also heard of resource-based economy, which they speak about in the Zeitgeist Addendum documentary, which, it's a no-brainer that the monetary system and man needs to build a system that coincides with the way that nature works. That is a no-brainer.
Right.
But, of course, if you are a sociopath and all you care about is fake wealth, man-made, I call it genetically modified wealth, what's the point of having a lot of money if you're a sociopath? I
once I got involved with a group that I won't call their name, but it was a big sales operation that was basically centered around a pyramid scheme. And the more I went to their rallies and the more I was around them, there was the all-night rallies where you sit up and it's mind conditioning. And I finally told myself, if I've got to be like these people to be rich, I don't want to be rich. I don't want money if I got to act like this.
Exactly.
I can't live with myself any other way than like I am right now. And I guess from a financial standpoint, that's kind of unfortunate. But from a spiritual standpoint, I am my own man. Nobody tells me what I can and can't do other than the laws of the land. I speak my mind. And, I've got a little rule. If you don't want my opinion, don't ask for it. Because I'll certainly give it to you.
Well, we have just about it's coming up on 3 minutes left. So let me see. Even Mark Manning, who the director of the Rising film, spoke about the doctors not even coming out and admitting that people were suffering from exposure to a toxic chemical because either they've been threatened. In the Rising film also, a lot of the people speaking out about their health concerns are being physically threatened.
Listen, there were a lot of us being threatened down there, and it wasn't just about health. People like myself, the freelance journalists that were on the coast, we were taking flack from the cops all the time. The BP goons, if they found out where I was, they would drive by, they would watch what I was doing. I was in fear a lot of times for my safety. I would never let anybody know exactly where I was. And every time I left the town to go somewhere else, I'd come on social media and say that I was going in a 180-degree opposite direction. Yeah. We were all afraid. There were lots of threats. And the BP goons, they were definitely there. And, yeah, I believe these doctors were physically threatened. I think there were some mighty mysterious deaths along the coast, too. Matt Simmons, for one. He came out with the idea that what was out there was not fixable, that it was going to always be a problem. He was found dead in his bathtub. They said he had a heart attack, but he had water in his lungs.
Yeah, heart attack. See, that's what I'm saying. It's like when you want the truth, you just go to the facts and the evidence, you know. So water in your lungs, heart attack, wait a minute. Like you were even saying that doctors were calling what was happening to the people in the Gulf food poisoning.
Yeah, at one point in time, there were several fishing boats. The number I got was that there was around 100 boats called in off the water because of illnesses. There were people in hospitals all up and down the coast that came from different boats, but the doctors were pretty much uniformly saying it was food poisoning. I'm sorry, but they didn't all buy the food from the same place, and they don't all have the same cook. They were being sprayed.
Exactly.
You know, these are things that we know now. They denied it at the time.
Unbelievable.
They denied they were aerially spraying this stuff anywhere there were people involved, but we know it happened. In Ocean Springs, Mississippi, some dear friends of mine were out on the beach. A KC-130 comes over. A few minutes later, they feel this tingling all over their skin from water droplets or liquid droplets coming down on them, and their son has been sick ever since.
Yeah,
it was real. It happened.
Absolutely. Well, John Wathen.
Thank you.
I want to thank you. You are a journalist. You live in Alabama, but you covered a lot of the aftermath of the BP oil spill cover-up, and you're with an organization called Hurricane Creek Keepers.
Right.
And I hope to interview you again, and I'd really like, to keep abreast of what is going on down there.
All right, I would really like to encourage people to keep an eye out for the rising. When this comes out, it's going to be a good watch. It's going to be well worth the time to look into it.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
All right.
Okay, bye-bye.